Church 14 service call. The man from Huntsville Environmental Services spent the better part of a day in the basement of Benny's house. There was heavy corrosion damage in the plenum of the system. The humidifier and dehumidifier were a total loss. The corrosion almost compromised the evaporator housing. A lot of rust had to be vacuumed out of the fins. Even the sensors had to be replaced. Charlene brought him sweet tea and watched him as he worked, asking questions along the way. It was too big a job for her to deal with on her own, but she wanted to know how to do it if it happened again, or better yet, how to prevent a recurrence. How long do you think that thing has been leaking before it caused the dehumidifier to fail? Looks like about a year or so. What's that white stuff all over everything in there? Lime. From the water? Yep. We're sitting on a huge block of limestone. All the groundwater around these parts flows over, under, around, and through it. If it left white stuff in here, why is the stuff I scrub from around the drains reddish brown? A lot of the pipes in the water system are iron. The lime makes the water slightly alkaline, so it picks up iron from the pipes. As it evaporates, it leaves iron behind. This leak was big enough for a long enough period that there was more lime than iron left behind. If you took this stuff to a lab, you would find iron too. I can't help but notice that you are replacing all the copper pipes with plastic here. Wouldn't copper like what was there be better? No. This plastic will be more reliable. The copper corroded through after about 20 years. This plastic with stainless fittings won't ever corrode. Not only that, if the house is left unattended and there is a hard freeze, it won't rupture. Yeah, I remember having to replace a lot of pipes after the big ice storm in Connecticut. It cost Dad's insurance company a fortune. We had to take walls out. Dad bought a generator after that one. We were in a motel for 3 weeks. The power was only off for a few days. It doesn't get that bad here, but if there is a regulator failure in the system, the refrigeration section in the system will freeze the pipes that are inside the plenum. It's better to do the whole thing in this plastic stuff. During the interaction with the repairman, Charlene noticed something unsettling. He wasn't giving her any sort of special attention. Usually younger men, even some middle-aged men, had trouble concentrating around her and had trouble carrying on a conversation. They stared. This guy didn't. He was friendly and businesslike, even with the two of them alone in the basement. Not only that, but she was relaxed around him. She wasn't sure which was more unsettling. She enjoyed watching him work. It was almost magical to see 3 sheets of galvanized steel turn into a plenum and all the necessary gussets and flaps needed to control the airflow through it. It was a delight to see and hear the system purr back to life with no malfunction lights on. She felt drawn to him as he leaned against the washing machine as he filled out the invoice. She didn't expect that at all. It had been such a long time since she'd had that feeling that it totally surprised her. She blushed and stammered when he handed her the paper. She was really glad that she didn't own the house when she saw the numbers, but she hoped that the repairman didn't notice what was going on inside her. Church 15, Unole's birth. It was hot. The leaves drooped on the trees. The birds and insects were too hot to say much to each other. Just a kind of half-hearted chirping to ritually mark territory, but not much else. The air was hard to breathe. Even in the shade, there were no cool spots, except 2. One was the spring house. It wasn't inhabitable because the ceiling was low and the spiders only left enough room to dip a bucket. The other was the space between the twin rocks. It was always shady there, and the monoliths absorbed a huge amount of cold during the winter, so they heated very slowly. They also were more or less surrounded by large trees. Between the rocks was inviting. She felt the comfort therein calling her. Her clothes clung to every inch of her body. Water dripped off the hem of her wrap-around maternity skirt. The child inside her was displaying discomfort too by elbowing the landscape. Maryanne felt huge and sluggish. Since the heat started, it was hard to eat. Her stomach was always upset. She snapped at Jack that morning over nothing. She never remembered being so uncomfortable. Heat rash covered most of her body, and her clothing aggravated the situation by being wet and sticky, and not moving when she did, aggravating the heat rash. She was the most miserable she ever remembered being. The shack provided shade to an extent, but the ancient wood and stone didn't do anything to keep out the heat. It was time to find a cooler place. She had been having pangs in her lower abdomen for the last 2 or 3 days. Some of them were a minor distraction, and others stopped her in her tracks until they passed. Jack was in the woods checking on his bees. Hot days were good to work with them because they would be mostly out foraging and the combs would be lightly defended. She was alone in the shack when another pang hit. It knocked her to her knees and made her dizzy. The baby inside her squirmed and kicked as well. That and the heat sealed the deal. She would fill the water jug and move in between the rocks until it got cooler. She scrawled a quick note to Jack and set out for the rocks. She had to stop in the big clearing for another contraction, which was worse than the last. She sat on one of the logs around the fire pit until it passed. She waddled the rest of the way to the rocks, only stopping a couple of times to drink from the jug. As she crawled through the opening into the hollow, she felt really nauseous. The only thing that came up was the last drink of water. She collapsed in a contraction onto the soft, cool moss, where she spent so many hot afternoons. It felt so good to be there. The contractions were getting closer together and a lot stronger. She felt safe and secure, though. The voices from the rocks comforted her. When Jack told her about the voices, she laughed. How can them big ol' rocks talk? She laughed. She wasn't laughing now. The voices, mostly female, now said comforting things, reassuring things. She was totally alone, but the voices were company and help. As she tuned her mind into the voices, the pain from the contractions lessened. The voices blended together into an ancient song. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The voices chanted and sang about the beginnings and sometimes endings of life. We are pushed out into the world, and in turn, we push out our sons and daughters into the world, as our mothers did before, and our daughters will do in the future. The mother has made us mothers to share in the act of creation, as our mothers shared with us. We share it with our daughters. The mother gave us a gift to us and us alone. As we are mothers too, the act of creation is our gift to us and the world. We give the gift. We are the gift. Without us, there is no one. There is no greater gift than the life from our wombs. Hearken, my child. It is hard work. Your heart must be strong. Your heart must be pure. During this time, you are the mother of us all, through your loins, past the universe, everything known, everything felt, everything loved. Peace be on you, child of the mother of the child, the future of us all. Fear not, for even in death, there is life, and in life, there is no one. Death, as it is, as it always was, and as it should be, a renewal of body, of soul, of spirit. Pain can be pleasure, if it brings beauty, as pleasure can be pain, if it brings ruin. Mind these things. In the act of becoming, in the act of creating, together as one, then as two. There was another rumble, louder and closer. Her water broke. It flowed over her thighs into the moss and disappeared. There was another huge contraction that stopped her breath and brought tears to her eyes. The thunder rumbled again, louder than before. The air took on a heavy quality and it got darker in the hollow between the rocks. The voices became gentler, more loving and soothing as they continued. We are here for you. We have done what you are doing, and your daughters will do in the future, as you will be there for them. Listen to us. Do as we say. You are the mother now, the mother of us all. Thunder rumbled even louder this time, followed by the sound of wind moving in the trees outside. Another stronger contraction swept through her body. She felt a pulling in her pelvic floor. The child inside her kicked and punched. The voice from the dream said, "It's time," followed by another kick from inside. The voices stopped singing. A mature female voice said, "Maryanne, listen. I will tell you what to do. Focus on me, and there will be no pain." A stronger wind moved through the trees outside. The mighty trees that had been there since the days of Sequoia moaned as their branches moved in the wind. A cooling breeze came through the small opening. Maryanne took off the wraparound skirt and put it aside. It was totally soaked. She took off her shirt, actually one of Jack's t-shirts, and wrung it out. Another gust of wind moved the trees outside. A flash of lightning lit up the little haven, followed immediately by a very loud thunderclap. Yet another big contraction. The tightness in her pelvic floor got stronger. The child kicked again. The voice from the dream said, "I want out now." The mature female voice said, "Put your back against the rock behind you and squat with your feet apart as far as you can." She complied. It was hard because another contraction interrupted the move. It was strong enough to gray out her vision. She panted from the exertion. As she moved into the squat, the tightness eased in her pelvic floor. The kick from inside became a steady push. The voice outside said, "Wait for the peak of the next contraction." Outside, the wind became a steady roar, increasing in intensity. Another strong contraction swept through her. She waited as she was told. It was hard to wait, as she had an impulse to push. The contraction intensified, as did the roar outside. She could hear things snapping and breaking outside. The voice said, "Push, now, hard." She felt a tearing as she pushed. Her child pushed too. The air became very still and very light. The noise outside was deafening. The snapping and cracking became scraping and breaking. Things were crashing against the rocks. The voice said, "Harder. Push." She pushed. Her vision grayed out again as she pushed. She could feel the child inside pushing too. She could feel more tearing in her pelvic floor and the child moving toward the outside. The contraction stopped. She stopped pushing and waited for another. The voices started singing again. The words were foreign but triumphant in tone. It was obviously a song of joy. Another contraction came. She pushed. The child moved more to the outside, faster than before. She felt something against her thigh. She pushed harder. Suddenly, the noise outside stopped. There was a rush from inside her, and there was a baby on the moss underneath her. She pushed again involuntarily, and the placenta followed. She lay back against the stone and panted. She was suddenly filled with peace and clarity. She tore a strip from the bottom of the t-shirt and tied off the umbilical cord, then she bit through it, separating it from the placenta. She then lay back and put the baby to her breast. It was a girl, with red hair. She wiped the blood and mucus from her and wrapped her in the t-shirt. They were mother and daughter. The voices fell silent. It was raining outside. Between the rocks it was quiet, dry, and secure. She looked at her daughter and said to her, "I am going to call you Lucille." The voice from the dream said, "Okay, but my name is Unole Adelojos GI. I will allow you to call me Lucille, but nobody else. I am Adelojos GI. Unole because of the cyclone, but Adelojos GI for my life and role." Then her voice fell silent, and the baby cried. They sat together and rested in the space between the rocks. Outside, the hilltop was scoured clean of vegetation.